Hello, it's Wednesday, February 28th. Welcome to Citizens Forum. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every couple of weeks. Our first guest is Matt Legg. And Matt, can you tell people who you are with?
Yeah, so I work for Canadian Friends Service Committee. It's the Peace and Social Justice Agency of Quakers in Canada.
Well, I must say the Quakers, to me, the Quakers are not only famous, but famous in a very good way. It's always, when I think of the Quakers, I always think of something positive. And the specific work you do is?
Yeah, I'm the Peace Program Coordinator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peace Program Coordinator at this particular moment in time would seem to be very, very important because there doesn't seem to be a lot of peace just about anywhere.
I think that we're living in a moment of a lot of polarization. I think polarization has always been with us, but it's certainly forefront in many people's minds right now. And so peace issues are particularly important. And I think that there are a number of practical and useful skills that most of us don't get taught in school, don't see through the media, and that can actually really help this situation.
Okay, what are some of those skills?
So for the last few years, I've been hearing amazing stories from Quakers. So I'll give you one concrete example. So in places like Rwanda, following a genocide, you have people coming together, some of whom may have perpetrated the genocide, some of whom were on the other side, and actually rebuilding some form of trust together with the support of volunteers that are trained in trauma counseling and trained in trust building. So that type of a story to me is just amazing. I couldn't imagine. And those types of stories don't get out there very often. We hear a lot about the bombings. We don't hear a lot about the people at the grassroots who are building peace. And I also think that it matters in Canada just as much as it does in Rwanda, that there are ongoing needs for peace building and community building. So I was really inspired by these types of stories that I've been hearing working for Quakers to try to share this with a wider audience. But I also wanted to interrogate Quaker beliefs so that it's not just a faith-based book or something like that. It has to be evidence-based as well. So I started looking into neuroscience, social psychology, behavioral economics. What are the findings from these fields, and how does it inform our peace building approaches? How can it really help us to build a better society, really? So there are practical things that we can do, and that's why I've written this book. Yeah.
Years ago I watched a video of a speaker from Britain taken by a fellow by the name of Pedro Mora, and talking about what's important in terms of community and society. What that British professor was saying was that income equality was, I think he would say, primary. Would you agree with that issue?
So you're raising a great question. So I saw one really interesting study that was looking at intractable conflicts, really difficult conflicts, and it was saying that they had looked at all of these different professors and what they were proposing, and each of them said there is a key entry point, but there were 57 different entry points that had been proposed. So one of them would be something like equality, perhaps. But a complex problem means that it's emergent, and that each of these different variables are all influencing each other in a very destructive, potentially, dance of factors. So I'm not ready to say that the one answer is this or that, but I am ready to say that there are many issues that can each influence each other successfully. So that's a structural peace issue. The book also looks at interpersonal peace issues, and it also looks at inner peace issues, because a lot of these problems start in our own minds with our own thinking and the stories we tell ourselves.
Now, the book is called The Peace Virus.
Yeah.
And what is the theme or idea of the book?
So the idea is that peace can spread between people like a virus. And there's actually some very interesting research that backs up this idea that emotional states can spread like viruses, Decisions can spread like viruses. And so some of the most interesting research I found on this was about happiness from a place called Framingham, Massachusetts. So it's a small town. And since the 1940s, a bunch of volunteers there have been giving a lot of information to researchers every few years. And so the researchers looked at different data points, and they found essentially that if I become happier, my friends become happier, and their friends become happier, and even their friends become happier. So there's 4 degrees of separation before you stop seeing the effect show up. And what they were able to find as well, because they had gotten this data year after year after year, is that that wasn't happening because happy people clumped together. It was happening because happiness was actually increasing and then spreading, sort of like a virus. So that got me thinking about how can we spread a positive infection? How can we make peace go viral?
Yes. I hope there's an answer to that question.
There are a lot of tips in the book. So the book is comprised of short chapters that would have a little bit of these studies, some theory, and then it would have tips, practical applications, and then it has exercises that can be done in a group. So it's really experiential learning is the ideal way to learn these types of skills. And then it will have stories. So some of those grassroots stories that I was mentioning, like from Rwanda.
Do you want to mention a few other things that are in the book, or just
Sure. The book covers a lot of territory, so I'm happy to talk about all kinds of different
So
things.
in terms of like building a better society, building peace, what are some things that here in Canada, and even here in Victoria, we can be thinking of or looking at or doing?
I tend to want to focus personally on the inner peace and interpersonal peace, not because it's more important, but because I think it's more accessible and more directly implementable for many of us who aren't going to become activists.
Yes.
And so I think it is very important. So there are all kinds of things that individuals can do. Looking at the way that we communicate with each other, so many of these problems are problems about communication, problems about assumptions, misunderstandings. And so there's a whole section in the book on communication, and I would point people, if they're interested, to those type of skills. It's something that can be built in an afternoon that could change a problem you've had with a family member for your whole life. It could.
Yeah, well, really, I think a lot of that stuff to me, because I know nothing of it, but it always seems so important. I wish I and all of us knew more about that.
In doing research for this book, I found so many things that I thought, I could have been taught that in school.
Yeah.
It's so practical. It's useful for any type of application in my life. And I was taught to debate people instead. Like we had debate class in English. And, the research is showing that presenting people with factual information, debating them, in many cases, it actually just entrenches positions further, and it doesn't actually help to build any type of shared understanding. So it's not always our best approach, but that's really how we're taught in this kind of win-lose mentality,
Yes.
either-or mentality.
What is something that could work a little bit better?
Yeah, so there's a technique developed by Marshall Rosenberg called nonviolent communication. That's one type of approach that can work really well in certain situations. And essentially, it's taking the emphasis off of your judgment about someone else and what they're doing, what's happening, and it's putting the emphasis onto your own need, what you see happening and what your need is. So your need is not what you tell the other person that they should do, right? That's what we often do. You should do this, you should do that, you should listen better, something like that. Your need is what you need. So I need to be respected. I need to feel care. So if I'm speaking about, a conflict that's happened, let's say I texted you and you didn't respond, and then the next time I see you, I could just assume that you did that because you're a bad person or you don't like me anymore or something like this. But I could say, I texted you and you didn't respond, and I'm feeling a need to, feel that respect from you that you would respond to texts. So in that sense, I'm not telling you what you should do.
Yeah.
I'm not judging you,
Yeah.
but I'm saying this is what my need is. I'm laying it on the table.
Yeah.
And so it's a subtle difference, but it can make a big difference in communication, because oftentimes we don't know what the other person really needs. We just know what they're telling us we should do.
No, open and honest communication is so important. I wish I had been better at it. I'm probably the worst, among the worst. Maybe we're all the worst, but
I think we all feel like we're the worst sometimes.
it would be nice to get training in it and teaching in it, and because we could probably all get a little bit better at least, have some idea of what we're doing. You've talked about some of the things that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Nonviolent communication, or you mentioned the issue of unarmed civilian protection.
Great. So there's a general idea that in a conflict that's already escalated to violence, it's necessary to protect people with military force.
You mean talking about something that happens, for example, in Libya was
Sure.
one story.
Sure. Yeah. So Libya is an example where the world community, NATO, decided to bomb as a means, apparently, of protecting people. That was the claim that was put forward.
And the Canadian general, I believe, led the bombing.
Yeah, and so
with the full support of the Canadian media, as I recall.
Sure.
And
yeah.
Politicians.
Almost everyone. Yeah.
The country was destroyed.
Country was destroyed.
There was no reason for what they did, except they wanted to destroy the country, I think.
Well, and was it rebuilt afterwards? I mean, was it so?
It's called a failed state now, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it was, I believe, the most prosperous nation in Africa. Yeah.
So that's an example where you're talking about protection, but what you're doing is actually has no real way to deliver protection, and there isn't a plan that's actually in place to help build that security, stability.
It's almost more like that's the excuse they use to convince us that there's a good reason for what they are going to do. Well, they being the military-industrial complex, I guess.
Yeah, and before that particular UN motion was approved, Brazil voted against it and said this could make things worse, and it did make things worse. So there were at least some governments that were stepping forward and saying that's what could happen.
Brazil is very brave.
But there are alternatives, and one of the reasons that people support these types of missions is because they believe there are no alternatives, and that's wrong. So this is unarmed civilian accompaniment is a particularly important alternative, and it's one that's getting little by little a little bit more legitimacy within the UN. And
what does it mean?
So civilians who don't have any weapons are asked by local communities to come in and provide protection.
Wow.
That could be in different contexts, but typically it's going to be in a civil war or something like that. It could be to protect local human rights defenders, so people who are journalists who are exposing corruption in the government, who need protection, or otherwise they might be assassinated. So they call on internationals, Canadians and others, to come into that community and to be there, to witness, to document what's happening, to send that information back home, and to keep people safer. And
do the Quakers participate in that?
Yeah, many Quakers participate in this. There are various agencies that have been created by Quakers. So this is a typical reaction. I mean, you're unarmed in a conflict zone. This is very dangerous. Well, it turns out, according to the best data that we have from more than 3,000 people who were sent to the field, about 5 died. And so
safer than being in Chicago on a weekend.
It's actually not that dangerous as you might think, and it's actually
we're going to have to end it right there. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate we don't hear more about this, because I know the Quakers always do great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back to Citizens Forum. We have with us today Dave Friend, and he has an organization called Friendly Organics. And Dave has been helping out in schools for at least the last 10 years from what I know, and we'll talk more about that. But Dave's branched out now to an even larger audience. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks. It's been 2 years, but it's nice to be back.
Okay, and we won't let that lapse as long next time. I hadn't realized that. So, Dave, basically, could you just outline what you have been doing up in the last several years and now how you're branching out?
Sure, I decided for many reasons, if we have time to cover some of them, to educate, encourage and empower people to grow health-friendly organic food. And started focusing on the kids, created a program called Growing Young Farmers School Program, founded a non-profit, then founded a charity with a board of directors. We have coordinators, we have grower educators, and we have a waiting list. The program has a waiting list of schools wanting the program, so I'm very pleased and proud about that.
That's fantastic.
And then last year, June, with plenty of notice, I actually stepped away, I suppose, resigned from that, knowing that it was in really, really good state.
Yeah.
And then decided to retire again. And then all of a sudden things changed, and I resurrected Friendly Organics, a small business I had a number of years ago.
Okay. And so what do you do with the Friendly Organics that's different than what you were doing with
Yeah,
the
it's a good
schools?
question, thank you. It's about sustainability.
Yeah.
And so we still teach people to grow food, from preschoolers to seniors. So now there is a wider range. It was very much on the kids for the Growing Young Farmers. Now Friendly Organics has got a program called Save a Seed, Plant a Seed, Grow a Garden. So seed saving is huge, and that program is available from preschool to high school.
Okay.
And then we have other programs and workshops, which we're doing for adults, and it's based on sustainability. For instance, if we don't get food, we die. If we don't get water, we die, and then we're looking at the harvesting and managing rainwater to grow food. And it's the managing part of it that, from my background of a management consultant in the UK, we're doing feasibility studies. We have one at Government House running at the moment, looking at sort of harvesting, managing rainwater. So it's all that sustainability, many things in there. Sort of thing.
Okay, firstly, so now you're looking at maybe at a little older audience now. Say I'm retired, I'm moving into a condo, I've got a balcony maybe.
Sure.
Do I still have a crack at growing something organically?
You better. Yeah, so the beauty is that one of the programs we're doing is called Lasagna Gardening, where basically we've got a workshop coming up this Saturday and then some more coming up. And we can teach you how to grow within reason on the balcony and grow the health-friendly organic food without sending water to your neighbors below or to the side.
Yeah. So how about, say, if I didn't have any chance to garden near me, are there other plots of land or anything like that we can access?
Bit of a challenge. We're actually looking into that very much so. I had a meeting this morning, a luncheon meeting in Sydney, and we're looking at starting to create some more community gardens there. But basically, I decided to focus on going to the people who was really sort of ready for educating.
They already had some resources. And
The schools, they've got generally a piece of land that we can squeeze a little gardening. But, Sydney Elementary, we started with one raised bed, we now got a food forest there.
Yeah.
At Government House, we started with a small area, we've now got a food forest there for kids to grow, sort of thing,
So how does the harvesting and rainwater, how does that tie into the operation?
Sure. So just a link with Government House, and it's I started there the program about 5 years ago, and got to know everybody there, including the present Lieutenant Governor, awesome lady, and she calls me Mr. O. I think I can say that on camera. I don't know, as Mr. Organic. Mr. Organic is my marketing name, as you probably know. And so we're just having lunch one day with a couple of the directors there at the house. And I mentioned about Vic had been asking me about doing a feasibility study, rainwater. Then the next thing I know, I've been told, in the nicest possible way, to start a feasibility study there. So there's an area called the Muse, where there's a tea room and a little museum down at the bottom of the grounds there. And so we've looked at that. We've brought somebody on board, and now we're waiting for the final approval to see if that's going to go ahead. And what will happen there, we will harvest, we will manage, that means storing and filtering the water. And there's 2 vegetable gardens now on the grounds, one run by the Friends of Government House, which I am a member of anyway, and the other is the children's garden I created for the Sir James Douglas student kids sort of thing. So it's a
Yeah.
tie-in to sustainability. You know.
So what about the safety of using rainwater for irrigation? Is there any issues about the quality of the water?
Yeah, it's a good point. So it's not just a matter of letting it run off any roof. You've got to make sure that there's no sort of what I call the sort of it's like the bad bugs versus the good bugs when you're gardening. In this case, it's very much so. Whatever's left on those roofs. So, but there is enough, I think, sort of almost organic filtering systems that when that water is coming through, it's as good as almost any rainwater that may pick up some sort of stuff in the skies as it's coming down. And we live near airports and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff floating around and stuff. So yeah, we're making sure that the water has been and it will be tested we're putting in a testing thing. So when it actually comes around ready to go onto the grounds, then it'll be ready to grow the food.
Do you think perhaps rainwater might be even better for the plants than say chlorinated city water, for instance?
You got it. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, as a past certified organic grower, I mean, I grew most of my food from the rainwater, and it's allowed obviously under the certification standards and guidelines. So it's a natural way, although again there is a lot of stuff going up in the air that we humans are part of putting up. But no, I believe it. The more you can use that, the better, sort of thing, and the safer it is. I just want to say this, that in November of last year, the first week, and we're now February, we had millions and millions of rainwater dump on Vancouver Island, and most of that disappeared. I mean, it did help to grow some trees, that's nice. But yeah, only a few weeks before that, farmers were paying money for water to grow food. So where's that balance? When you think about it, where it's all to, I use the word it's all to pot, but maybe I shouldn't use that word on the...
Well, you know what? We're gardeners at our place.
Yeah, that's right.
We have just a large lot, and we have two or three places for gardens on our lot. Some sunnier places and some shadier. Some have better soils than others and all that. And we're just learning, like, boy, we can put the tomatoes here and they do so much better.
Tomatoes? Oh, that's same as tomatoes, yes.
The tomatoes, that's right. We'll talk English from now on.
Okay,
I'll try.
Thank you.
But anyway, for the tomatoes, and we thought we were brilliant for a couple of years, and they grew perfectly.
Yes.
Then they're not growing as well anymore.
Yes.
And gardening is forcing us to get plugged into the environment in which we live. And in the summertime here, we live in a desert. And in the wintertime, it's a swamp. And I don't know if there's any time in between. It just seems like it go from rain, then they just turn the tap off, and then by the time we're into August, our wells are being taxed. And we're realizing, oh gosh, we had a lot of great ideas for growing. Now we're just struggling to keep those plants watered, and they usually don't do as well when you're scrimping on your water too.
And that's one of the beauties of the harvesting and managing of rainwater, linked to how you grow the food. We're big proponents of the lasagna gardening, where you're gardening layers. Workshop this weekend is about lasagna gardening for the adults. And it's just what you're really doing is building a living compost heap. So what grows in a compost heap, all kinds of things come up in your compost heap, a volunteer. Whereas this way, we're managing it, again, from my management background. And the kids in the program, like preschoolers, are actually helping build these and planting it and take ownership of it and everything like that.
Yeah, and the plants decide they love that compost heap.
Right.
And we got some great potatoes. Potatoes.
Oh, potatoes is good.
from our compost and other things that just volunteer that just go crazy.
So if you were then sort of managing that lasagna gardening in the nicest relaxed way and doing companion planting, you're doing good bugs versus bad bugs, etc., then you have a more natural yield. And especially back to the kids, which we're still doing. I mean, you'll never get me not teaching kids to grow food. When a preschooler comes up to me and says, Mr. Organic, can I pull that radish out the ground and eat it? I said, you can. You have to wipe it on your trousers. Don't worry about your mother and father wipe it. But take a little bite of it. And of course, they take a bite of it. But then, all of a sudden, they've taken ownership what they've grown, So.
Well, really?
That's a big key.
I think that's, like, we grew up with a garden. We were a large family. When it was time for dinner, we were just going out into the garden and ripping out the chard and the potatoes and bringing things in. And we never thought that there was any other way to do it. And then as I get a little older, and of course, as modernization occurred, things get purchased at the store, to the point where I think a lot of, especially children, don't really know where that food is coming from.
And that's a very valid point, because when I found out we've only got 3 days of food supply on the island,
Yeah.
I thought, what can I do in my small way? And the simple answer is, if we've only got 3 days, then we need more people growing more food in a community for a community. And I thought, well, kids are a really good audience, and I'm pretty good at teaching and managing that. So that's why I started that program.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, when I realized about the rainwater situation so it's different things that have pushed me to do in my retirement to do.
Yeah.
I don't need to do it, but I want to do it. And I think that's
Well,
one of the
you're
key
living
things.
in Victoria, and I hear that retirement word being mentioned about myself.
Yeah.
And I can't see how what retirement's going to look like. I got a lot of ideas.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to be a pretty busy guy. I'm kind of looking forward to having more time.
Well, the other thing to talk about having more time, really the Government House connection. I've done the 3 Earth Days now, hosted it, arranged it for kids to come there and our honours to come down. It's just been great. And then all of a sudden one day they said, well, would you be interested in doing tours in the house? I said, Mr. Organic doing tours as a tour d'océan. And next thing I know, I was told again in the nicest possible way. So now I'm a trainee tour guide in the house, as well as then looking at gardens outside the house.
Well, that's nice. Are you going to be doing plants inside the house too?
No, not really. We'll be doing a lot of plants outside, hopefully, in the not too distant future.
Well, they got lots of room there to garden.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be
Approaching
great.
40 acres, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge park
Sure.
there. People don't realize how big those gardens
I've
are.
had time just to say one little sort of...
Please do.
Okay, so, kids say, as we know, there used to be a program years that kids said the darndest things or whatever. But I've had many, many things. And one of the latest ones, I was doing a kindergarten class and asking them, Mr. Organic has forgot, what have we been doing? Talking about, food and diets. And this little girl on the front row, I had him on the carpet inside the class. And she said, my mother is a oh, I said, do you mean vegan? She said, yeah. And I said to the rest of the class, this little girl's mother is a vegan. And little boy at the back said, my mother's Catholic. You can't write that stuff. Sorry. Every time I hear it and say it, I think it's amazing, So anyway, that's one of the reasons I do what I do. 3 days only of food supply, kids saying that sort of thing.
Oh, I know because my wife well as
Yeah,
a teacher, and
yeah.
she'd often come back with stories like that, even in the gardening, where the kids were just loving it.
Yeah.
So you have a website?
Yeah. It's a new one.
Yeah.
We do mainly most of our sort of marketing now through social media. My son is volunteering that. He's a marketing and social media guru sort of thing. So
Right.
friendlyorganics.ca.
Yeah.
The best way really is to, I don't know if it'll come up, contact me by email.
Right.
That's the easiest thing to do. It's davefriend@friendlyorganics.ca.
That's pretty easy to remember.
davefriend@friendlyorganics.ca. That's the easiest way sort of thing.
So anyway, Dave, it's great to have you back here, and hope to have you back sooner next time, so you can keep us abreast with all the developments. And you're doing a fine job for the community, and I want to thank you for that.
And thank you for the invite, and thank you for the compliments. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
So that's completes this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back. Our guest in this segment is Werner Simbeck, and unfortunately we're going to be talking about climate change, and the news does not look good. I don't think people can even... I often feel like I'm sitting in a cafe it was at Stalingrad, prior to the outbreak of the war, and sipping tea on a beautiful street and not knowing that, a year or 2 years later, everything was going to be destroyed, because that's almost where we're at. Maybe it is where we're at.
The reason why I said it's abrupt climate change, I'm not the person who comes up with these terms. Scientists who are really concerned about climate change, it's progressing so fast, it's abruptly changing our climate. The Northern Hemisphere right now is experiencing rather unusual weather. Europe is in a deep freeze, it's very cold there, and it's above zero at the North Pole right now.
Is it still?
It might be really, maybe it was a couple degrees above zero, maybe it's now a couple degrees below zero.
So it's been
but
like a
basically
couple
what
of
has
weeks.
happened is that the jet stream has been disrupted really. If you were to see an image of it, the jet stream normally is sort of a circular ring around the North Pole. That's kind of how you can imagine it. It's a wind pattern in the higher atmosphere that goes around the Earth. And that is no longer a one stream. It's not a single stream anymore. It's many streams going in different directions, circling around, broken up into bits and pieces. So what has happened is that the cold air at the North Pole has been pushed from warm air that was brought up, pushed towards Europe. So Russia in Central Europe now is quite cold. But in place of that cold air, warm air has come in, and now it was basically above zero at the North Pole. That has never happened again, or as far as we know, has never happened before in February. February normally is quite a cold month for the North Pole. That's when the ice grows. You know, when people maybe not familiar with the North Pole has ice floating on it, and it shrinks in the summertime because the sun is very, very intense up there. Basically have 24-hour sunlight during the summertime. And then right now they're in complete darkness. The sun does not shine at the North Pole, so it's quite cold. But right now there's all this warm air that has come up, and it's melting. Or it's not gaining ice, whichever way you want to look at it. I saw a graph that shows that the ice extent, that's how large the ice is, not how thick it is, but how large it is. It's as small or as large as it would be in June. So basically in the summertime. That's how small it is. So basically it's been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking in volume. The extent is a different thing, but extent is now really small as well. So it's just a matter of literally a couple years now, a few years, where we will have no ice at the North Pole in the summertime. You'll all melt. And what people may not understand, and I've been on your show many times now and I've been trying to say this, but the North Pole, the ice there, is basically our air conditioning unit for the globe. It drives the weather. Without it, the air conditioning system is broken, and we'll have abrupt climate change as a result of it. Things will change abruptly, not gradually, abruptly. That's the thing that people need to understand. And crops are going to fail unexpectedly. The weather will be all over the map. Right? Some places will be cold, and some, the deniers, I love this, right? Because on the eastern United States, not so long ago, it was very cold, unseasonably cold. But then on the west side, it was unseasonably warm because the jet stream, the way it was coming down, was basically creating a barrier between hot and cold. And that's what abrupt climate change is.
We're in serious existential trouble. And there is absolutely no response to it from North America.
I'll tell you what happened, and I said, remind me of Finland. The Finnish president came and saw the American president. And they afterwards at the White House, you know, it's quite formal, and then afterwards they have a press conference. Well, people can Google this, just look for Finnish president, and about the North Pole. Because what he said was, if we lose the ice at the North Pole, we'll lose the Earth. We'll lose humanity, basically, what he's trying to say. Because we will not be able to have a stable government anywhere in the world when the climate goes haywire and you can no longer predict when you're going to have a harvest. Basically, people will be starving, there'll be famine, there'll be droughts, there'll be war as a result of this. There'll be lack of water in a lot of regions of the world already. They're stressed. So things will get even crazier than they already are. And when we have a president in the United States now who doesn't believe in climate change. He likes to deny that science. The science is very firm, and it's over 150 years old, actually. But of course, the evidence gets better and better and better. So science is no longer arguing if there is or is climate change. The question is, how will it turn out for us? But they keep finding things that are inconvenient for our present economic model, which is growth. Grow, 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 right? Everybody wants to have a car. Everybody wants to have a house. You know, I get that. I understand that. Sure, that's the dream. That's the dream that we've been sold. But unfortunately, we cannot have that for everybody. With 7.5 billion people on the planet, we cannot live like that. That's not possible. And no politician will tell you that we have to shrink the economy in order to save the planet, because people don't want to hear that.
You know, I don't.
Is that what it is? That's what I'm
People
thinking.
don't want to hear it. I think it's the people who run the world and run our country don't don't want it because that's not how they make money. They make money from the crazy economy that we have now, which they control, which is just a consumer society. They have gained unimaginable wealth. The 84 richest people in Canada have as much wealth as the poorest 11.4 million. So I think we'd end up with better communities, better lives, better in many ways. We'd have less junk, but and it doesn't matter what I think or what anybody thinks because we just can't do it anymore. That fact is staring us in the face.
That's true. I mean, even if climate change wasn't happening, what we're doing is not sustainable. Right?
Absolutely.
We're cutting down the last bit of old growth on the island. They're now just fighting over the last bit of big trees.
Fukushima.
Well, I mean, that's some of these issues that you could look at and go, well, why aren't we dealing with them? Why aren't we dealing with these problems the way we should? We should stop burning coal. We should stop burning oil. And of course, our Prime Minister, he's approving pipelines. And he's trying to, make a point that this is in the best interest of Canada. I don't think so. It may be the best interest in some shareholders.
But a lot of people believe that.
Yeah.
And that's the official story. The official story that everybody's being told is that the pipelines are part of our road to meeting our Paris.
I'd tell you something else.
It's all a pack of nonsense, but that's what people are told.
They have tailing ponds in Alberta that are so gigantic and so toxic that should we have one of these extreme weather events where we have unusual amount of rainfall, way more than we've ever had.
Overflow.
Well, these dams that hold back these tailing ponds that are right next to the river are going to break, right? All this pollution is going to go wash down and wash basically up north and contaminate already an area that has already been suffering from the leakage that comes from this operation in northern Alberta. So that the bill associated with, there's no cleanup possibility if something like this was to happen. I mean, we had a tailing pond breach here in BC. Nobody went to jail. Nobody had to pay any fines, as far as I know. Business as usual basically continues on.
The old government, the Liberal government, allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
And the current government, the NDP government, allowed the statute of limitations on provincial charges to pass without filing any charges.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you see who runs our governments. And that's the problem. I mean, if we want to change, it's already too late to save things, but at least we can try to mitigate the total disaster.
I suppose.
But we need leadership, and we need government that cares about our futures, and we don't even have that. It's a mess.
I mean, the first thing that we would need is proportional representation. I mean, that's where it would start, right?
Yes, that would be a big.
Right. So maybe people who are listening, maybe that's something that they can focus on. Should this come up? Because that's where it starts. You need to change the government. Of course, we don't have a lot of time, but that's probably the next best thing is focus on changing the way we elect people, right? And then, of course, the next thing is who do you elect? But proportional representation would be a really good start, not just for British Columbia, but actually for the entire country. We have a Prime Minister who promised us we're going to change first past the post. And what did he do? He broke that promise, didn't he?
I don't know if you can say he broke the promise, because to me it was always a lie from the beginning.
Okay, well, fair enough.
The promise was a lie.
Fair enough.
He knew that in order to get elected, he had to promise it, so he did. But there was never any intention, because the people who run this country do not want, because proportional representation is more democratic.
Of course, yeah.
Therefore, it's the last thing they're ever going to let us have. But we can get it, but we're going to have to take it from them.
Right.
And the next 8 or 10 months, there's going to be a real fight in this province. And the other side is gearing up. I mean, they've got, I don't know who the leadership is, but Bill Tillman, who's right in with the NDP, and a woman who, I mean, these are people at the highest levels of our society, in the political realm. The three people who are leading the charge against PR, along with all the leadership candidates from the provincial Liberal Party, who will just say it's, even though the Liberal Party, the membership is 50-50 or 60-40, the leadership says no. So that's what we're up against.
I guess the question is, what should people do? You know, and I struggle with this every day. I don't know exactly what I should do either, but you try to focus on the little things. Maybe, you know, the people that you love, that are around you. Maybe treat them nice. You know, don't forget about that part. You know, you know, we only have a short period of time on this planet anyway. You know, individual lives as well as a species. You know, our species is not meant to stay here forever, right? Most species that have ever lived on this planet went extinct. And unfortunately, I think we're going to be one of those species who are going to go extinct as well. You know, that's maybe focus on that part, but maybe at least know that we're not here for a long time. Individually speaking, you know, 80, 90 years of life isn't actually all that much in the end of the day. So the little bit of time that we have, maybe we should try to make a difference. Try to make a difference in your own family, you know, with your own friends, as well as with your community, you know. Rather than chasing the last dollar, you know, trying to make more money and more money, well, maybe give a little bit.
Although nowadays, you got to chase the last dollar just to survive. I mean, they've made it so difficult for so many people.
Yeah, I understand.
Days.
Yeah, I mean, some people are definitely struggling, and I understand that. But for the ones that are better off, I think they should let go because they can't take it with them, you know.
Yeah. So proportional representation. Don't
must.
believe the media.
Be critical. You know, try to educate yourself a little bit beyond what the standard media is trying to tell us. And of course, there's so much information out there. Hard place to start. Where do you start?
Yeah.
But look for independent media. You know, be critical of them as well if you find independent sources. But, you know, use some common sense and compare. You know.
I would also say demand democratic government.
Yes.
Because, I mean, what do we as the people of this province want? I have no idea. But whatever it is, that's what we should be getting.
Yeah, very true. I think everybody wants clean air. Everybody wants clean water. I think it doesn't matter which political spectrum you're on. I think we all probably agree. Everybody wants their children to be healthy, right? And be able to have a good education.
And we're going to have to stop right there. Thank you very much, Vernon.
Yeah, thank you.
So we got to do something, folks. Thank you very much. Welcome back. I'd like to start by thanking again the volunteer crew and Shaw staff that always makes this program happen. It's Wednesday, February the 28th. It's the Walt and Jack Show. And Walt, what is our first topic?
Well, I brought in a number of things. As I was Googling and trying to find information for the show, one thing just led me to another. Now, Warner just mentioned Trudeau has broken the election promise, and you were talking about it too, about bringing about proportional representation.
Yes.
Now, Democracy Watch is an organization here in Canada that is now suing Trudeau for breaking that election promise. Now, here's what the Elections Act says. It says, it is illegal for anyone to make a false claim to try to convince voters to vote for any election candidate. So they're basically saying it's illegal. Now, and they are taking Trudeau to task on that issue.
Well, with the Commissioner of Canada Elections, you know, I wonder who appoints the Commissioner of Canada Elections, and I think if I ask that question, the answer is going to be Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
You know, to me, this, I mean, they probably don't have a chance. Nobody's talking about it. This is the first I've heard about it, although I think I did hear a mention. How long has it been going on?
Just a couple of weeks.
Okay. But he should not be able to do this to us. I mean, it should not be his decision that we can't have proportional representation.
Yeah.
Who does he think he is? You know, people voted for him because he promised it. But in our system of government, he has the right. The whole thing is crazy. Our system does not work. This is just one more example of it, and it's killing us.
Well, you know, let's just leave it at that, because we got lots more to go on, but Democracy Watch is doing something good.
Good for them.
They're not going to let this drop.
Yeah, people should just Google Democracy Watch and support it.
So basically, another item I stumbled upon was looking at Trudeau and seeing how he got into office. Now, there's a fellow by the name of Gerald Butts who was Trudeau's chief advisor, and he was the guy that made Trudeau into a serious candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party, and then helped him through the whole election campaign, and he's made Trudeau the prime minister.
Is Mr. Butts still involved in the government?
Yes, he is. He's Trudeau's chief advisor. I don't know what the exact term he has right now, but he's hanging around with Trudeau every day.
Right.
Now, Gerald Butts used to be the president of World Wildlife Foundation Canada. So that's interesting, an environmental group. The thing is that the World Wildlife
Fund
Group of Canada has a checkered past. And if you look at their environmental efforts back in the past, so they've been around since 1961. They were formed by the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, and with him and a bunch of his wealthy friends, 1,001 friends, they created this wildlife fund. The thing is that if you look at how they behaved over the years, you get some serious concerns about basically what this fund is all about. And it does not look like they were doing a lot of good things for the environment, and a lot of times they were doing things like moving people out of the jungle to protect the jungle, when later mining companies and others would show up and be able to do whatever they wanted. So
I read something about the World Wildlife Fund years ago that just shocked me. I don't even remember what it was, but I thought, that's not what I thought they were. They may very well be something very different than most people think they are.
There's a dark history there that should be explored, and you realize
so Mr. Trudeau's chief advisor was the former president.
And really the guy that made Trudeau really into the candidate that he became. Now, on from there, my Google search, I started looking at the environmental issues, and up popped the Green Party. And of course, the Green Party, it originally came from Germany, and the Nazis were environmentalists. So I know a lot of the Greens are going to not like me talking about this, but we can't deny the history. Oh, by the way, I wouldn't tell you not to vote for the Greens in an election.
And you've probably voted for the Greens
I
yourself.
have in the past. So, but the thing is, we have to know our history. We have to know how things go, and be aware that there's a dark side of environmentalism. There's some nastiness that goes on. And basically, it's hard to express what it really is, but you have people that are really concerned about one another and taking care of one another. And a couple of people we had today on the show, including Werner, really is saying that this is very fundamentally right to take care of each other. Whereas some environmentalists that have been associated with the Green Party are not that concerned about that aspect. They're more concerned with control, more concerned with perhaps forcing people to do certain things to take care of the environment that may infringe on their human rights and their fundamental democratic rights. So we have to be aware that there's always these flavors going on in the world. For whatever ideology you want to pick from, there's always a dark side, and the Greens do have that also.
I just want to throw in, I think the problem is that, I mean, no matter what the party is, from A to G, wherever you're going, when you get power, which politicians do have and which political parties do have, then you start getting people coming in who want to control that power. And they can take control of any party. And the problem is, we should not, as citizens of a democratic nation, we should never give that power to the politicians or to anybody else. The power has got to be in the hands of the public.
Well, we have to always exercise our franchise. We have to get in there, and as much as awful as politics are, especially in British Columbia, we have to stay at it and try to make it better. I just want to give you an example, because this is back about 10 years. No, actually, it'd be 17 years ago. I was a member of the Green Party. Adrian Carr was just becoming the leader of the Green Party. And it came to my attention that somebody on the board of directors of the Green Party, who shall remain unnamed, was a fellow that designed guidance systems for missiles. And I was taken aback by that. And I thought he should resign from the party, because right in the constitution of the Green Party, it says that we support human rights and peaceful actions and finding ways of finding nonviolent resolution for problems and all this flowery language. And we have a guy that's basically an arms dealer in the Green Party. Now, the thing is, things didn't go well for me when I brought that up.
Oh, I remember they didn't.
And he stuck around for a number of years.
Yes.
And was defended by Adrian Carr. So the strangeness never ceases, by the way. It's heartbreaking to have that happen. It really crushed my idea of what the Green Party should have been about. But these are examples that there are nasty people around, in my view, that basically don't represent the goals and the values of the Green Party, for the
And
most
parties
part.
have got to have a way of dealing with these issues. I don't know how, but that's what they have to do. And it
Yeah.
can't be from the leadership, because you can't give power to the leadership. It's just
Yeah.
too dangerous.
Well, Elizabeth May is a different type of politician, and I think we have to say, okay, there's something coming down from the top that's good, I think. She's setting very, very good examples, and she's very aware of the past and where this party's come from. And good things can happen from the Greens, but let's not forget that there are these other issues that we should be dealing with. Do you want me to keep plowing on, Jack?
Yes, please.
Because let's move on to what's happening with the pipelines and dams and things in this province, right? And the Tyee has just published a great article by Mitchell Anderson. The title of the article is "Only Fantasies, Desperation, and Wishful Thinking Keep Pipeline Plans Alive. There's no Asian market waiting for oil sands crude. In fact, there's no market anywhere waiting for oil."
Yeah, this is kind of amazing. I mean, this I don't know who he is, but he's writing, and usually the stuff in the Tyee is well researched and written by people who know what's going on in the field. I mean, for him to say there is no Asian market for oil sands crude and there is no market for this oil, I mean, what's going on?
Well, we're going to put that up, that article up online so people can read it. It's basically laying out the case. There's a glut of oil in the world. This type of oil that's coming out of the oil sands in Alberta is the dirtiest, hardest to use, hardest to extract. It's costing $88 per barrel to extract it, and they're selling it for $65. They're losing money hand over fist. The banks in Canada are losing billions of dollars on the whole deal, and they're writing off.
How can that be?
Well, the thing is, they're desperate. This is the last desperate thing to try to get this pipeline in, because they know nothing. They don't have anything going for them, basically, and they're hoping that something will happen. I think they know this. When they brought Rachel Notley in, which I think was pretty close to a political coup.
I agree 100%. It was a coup.
We're not foreign to that, as we saw what happened in BC here in the last
I mean,
few
basically,
elections.
the media destroyed the Conservative Party and brought in the NDP just as the oil prices crashed and
Yeah.
Alberta became a disaster area because of
But basically what Notley's doing as an NDP is something that could never happen under Conservative government. Be too much backlash. What Trudeau's doing, he's supposed to be some kind of liberal guy. No, just give it away to the oil companies again. Harper could never ram this stuff through, but give it to Trudeau, he can pull it off. And John Horgan here in BC, well, we had the Site C Dam decision. What can I tell you? I mean, the writing's on the wall there, as far as I'm concerned. And this leads me to the next issue, and something that you brought up. And from the Centers for Policy Alternatives, is it Ben Parfait?
Ben Parfit.
Ben Parfit, he is talking about, he was heard on CBC talking about the fact that the British Columbia government is taking fracked gas, natural gas, and pumping it to Alberta, to the tar sands, to help dilute the bitumen,
Yes.
to pump it to the coast through the pipelines that he is supposed to be opposing. So we're going to follow this story because this is so important for everybody to understand that what is real and what is fake. Well, we've already seen a pretty big thing happen with the NDP. You know, you're talking about lying, you know, the whole idea, the whole thing around the story around the building Site C, and the way it evolved and how they made the announcement really had a really bad smell to it.
As a member of the NDP, I'm afraid I have to agree with you 100%.
So we, you know, backing up, I think from the day they announced that they're going to send it to the Utilities Commission, that was a few weeks after they decided they were going to go ahead and build it.
Or a few years.
Who knows for sure, but it goes well back. And, you know, you hate to use the word lying, but all of a sudden it seems to be quite appropriate. Here we have another story here where are we selling gas to Alberta to pump?
Oh, absolutely, yes. There's no
You know,
question
are
about
we
that.
doing that?
Yeah.
So how sincere are we taking our government? Now, the thing is why I'm bringing that all up is because you and I and many, many others are thinking we don't trust the government of this province. We don't trust that they're going to bring about proportional representation or give us a fair crack at it. And one way to avoid that is have the government fall. So we're always thinking about what is the scenario? What is the issue that the Green Party is just going to say, no, that's it. We can't live with it. Proportional representation or nothing. We don't care. We're going to bring this government down. And that's why I'm worried about a story like that.
Well, and people are going to have to tune into our YouTube channel to see the exciting conclusion of
Well,
this
there you
because
go.
we're out of time.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this week's Citizen Forum.